that's fun. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, probably mostly afternoon. We delayed the show, and then hit play and went to the wrong stream. See what happens when we rush.
And then what's funny? What's funny is that you came back and we relaunched it and we get the wrong date on there again.
Yeah, but I'm not going to bother with it. All
right.
That work to put together the right slide, and it's just like I put the wrong one in. But that's the way live is.
Maybe Jay just identifies with May 26th. Today, you may think it's May 31st, Brian, but it's May 26th to Jay.
I'm going to show up in like a week to get on my flight, and they're going to be like, dude, it's like June 8th. I'll be like, no, it's June 1st. I identify with June 1st. Hello, everybody. I am your host, Jay Friesen, in the studio with the lovely Hadley Manning Heath, whatever you want to call yourself today.
Whatever.
Dr. Brian G. Mattson. And this is Dead Reckoning Radio, where we sit around this old door turntable and discuss those critical cultural moments from a distinctly Christian perspective that might be happening in the world around you. And we do have a great show for you lined up today, brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom, defending your right to freely live out your faith in the courts, whatever that faith may be. Find me another religious organization defending another religious group. Not going to happen. But ADF does. Because they understand that the freedom to live out your beliefs as you see fit is one of the most valuable freedoms we as Americans, and in fact humans, have. So visit them, www.adflegal.org. Thank you all for joining us. As I mentioned, we are live, and we are excited to be here as late as it is, and I have no idea what we're talking about because I have not even looked at the show notes yet.
What are we talking about today? Hadley's going to tell us all about government regulations and new rules that have come out that are going to harm your pocketbook, because she is the Dead Reckoning resident expert on such things. We're going to talk about gorillas and in cages getting shot and outrage over the murder of a gorilla in the Cincinnati Zoo. And we are going to give everybody very helpful reminders that no, not all cultures are equally cool.
Ah, well, that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a gander at some quick takes. Katie Couric, as we reported last week, Yahoo's Katie Couric is in hot water for egregiously doctoring an interview for her new movie about gun control. She responded by posting the original transcript in the interests of transparency. Does this get her off the hook for good intentions?
As of just a few moments ago, it has not gotten her off the hooks.
Just a few moments ago.
Just a few moments ago, it is reported from Epix, I guess it's the distributor. Her anti-gun film has been removed and will not be broadcast because of its deceptive editing. So apparently, wow. Katie's little mea culpa did not work. So it has apparently officially been pulled.
Now, have you guys seen anything about how much say she had in that? Because I know the director herself, Katie did not direct it, but the director said she made that call.
I just read that she did watch the film and she gave it the thumbs up.
Okay, there you go.
So,
when you do something wrong like that, when you are not transparent, or even if you make an honest mistake, you want to be the first one with that information. The fact that someone else had to break the story and someone else had to expose this for what it was, that's what does it for me. If Katie Couric had seen the film and said, oh man, I'm having second thoughts about this, I'm really starting to regret that we're deceptive in this way. If she had been the first person out with the news, that would have made a bigger difference, because now we have to question, if the Washington Free Beacon or Washington Examiner, whoever broke this story, hadn't gotten a hold of the audio and hadn't basically exposed what had happened, then would Katie Couric have ever said anything?
No, she wouldn't.
Probably not.
Who believes that?
We can't know. So
that's pretty hard to believe. This also reminds me of something that we talked about a lot on our DRTV show a couple of years ago, and that is, why is it so difficult for people to apologize?
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
I mean, to genuinely apologize. It is so rare in public life anymore for someone to, even if you got caught, to come out and simply come clean. You know what? I did it. I deceptively edited this. I'm really glad I got caught. This has been a real wake-up call for me. I will not do this again. I apologize. I ask the forgiveness of those people that I have made look bad in the film, or whatever it is. You can't find that anymore. Any kind of honest apology. It's always the yes, but, the I'm sorry if I offended you, or if I wronged you. There's never the full-throated, apology anymore. And I'm always reminded of that wonderful scene at the beginning of Clear and Present Danger. Harrison Ford playing Jack Ryan, when the sitting president's best friend gets found dead on a boat that's carrying a bunch of cocaine to the United States. And, of course, the news is breaking the story, so they have this Oval Office meeting of what are they going to do. And all of the president's advisors are like, well, you got to run from it, man. You just deny that you really knew this guy, that you ever, you were very close. You just deny. And Jack Ryan says, well, that's the wrong way to go. And everybody's shocked. And he's like, what? He says, when they say, were you friends? You say, best friends. When they say, were you closer than a brother? He says, don't give them anywhere else to go. Don't run from him, embrace him. That's the way. And it just seems to me that in public life anymore, everybody's always on the evasion denial track rather than just simply owning up and admitting it. Repentance is good for the soul. You know that?
Yeah. I had some really good advice one time. I don't remember if a professor told me this or someone else, but they said, when you apologize, try to avoid doing two things, because these are two things that people do when they apologize. They say, I'm sorry, but then they make an excuse.
Right. But.
Or they say, I'm sorry, and then they say, but you owe me an apology. You own some of the blame for this too. I'm sorry I did, but you this. And so after that, I really tried to make the effort to avoid doing those things whenever I apologize for doing something wrong. And it was hard. I mean, I don't even think we notice that we're doing it sometimes, but we kind of subtly want to include some additional information that makes our wrongdoing seem like it wasn't that bad, or seem like we're expecting an apology in return for something else, you know?
It's the if, and, or but. You've just made an apology, but then just excused it.
Yeah. If, but,
and turned around,
and maybe.
And turned around and maybe blamed somebody else for it.
Get rid of the if, but, or maybe in your apologies, and things will go better for you.
It's hard. It's hard to do, but it's good.
It is hard to do. Well, also happening this week, Jan Crouch, co-founder of Trinity Broadcasting Network, a.k.a. TBN, has passed away.
Oh, well,
she and her husband built that particular cable television empire.
And it is an empire.
It is an empire, but they're largely known as the purveyors of the health and wealth gospel. The you love Jesus, he'll make you healthy and wealthy. Which is
why on their show they always had,
interestingly,
the $5,000 suits and the Rolex watches.
Interestingly, the same thing is promised if you get up early. You'll be healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Is that all we had to do?
Yeah. Anyway, she was known for her outlandish fashion and her hair that kind of put Donald Trump's hair to shame. Although she was kind of a trendsetter with pink hair. May she rest in peace and not be too surprised when she shows up in heaven. I had the opportunity to visit TBN headquarters.
Ooh, tell us about that experience.
I'll try to do it graciously and still keep the punchline of the joke.
Yeah.
So they have a youth-oriented network called Juice TV that was interested in buying Dead Reckoning, the TV show, DRTV, our TV show DRTV. And so we were going to air in their nighttime segment right alongside Liberty University's new show and a couple other more edgier sorts of content. So I walk in and the place is just, it's...
You can't even describe it,
The interior design is lots of frills, gold.
It's like purple. Versailles, Louis XIV's.
Yeah, but
Versailles.
Badly done. It's
kitschy.
Kitschy. It's kind of like it was puked on by Louis XIV. It's kind of the remnants of whatever might have been nice about Victorian era England. Anyway,
that was France.
Same Victorian era period, big hair. Anyway, I was told by the staff that she decorated everything herself. Everything was decorated herself, and because she wanted everything to feel like it was a manifestation of what heaven looks like. Lord knows that if heaven is that bad, I don't want to go there. I will take hell over heaven. Jan was a little bit mixed up. So anyway,
it was that bad.
Rest in peace, Jan. You will always be the Yes, rest in peace. Another significant rest in peace that didn't really quite garner as much international attention because Brian,
should have.
Yeah, should have, because Brian is the nerdy ivory tower guy. He thinks it is highly significant. So, Brian,
take it away.
Yeah, who's now resting in peace?
Resting in peace is Professor John Bainbridge Webster.
Did he write the Webster's Dictionary?
He did not. He was a theologian, most recently at St. Mary's College at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He was formerly at King's College, Aberdeen. He was a man who examined me for my doctoral dissertation. He was formerly Lady Margaret Professor of Divinity at Oxford University, which is the highest office for academic theology that one can possibly have. Anyway, John, very shockingly, passed away last week at the young age of 65, shocking everybody in the academic theological world. Why is this important for you? Well, I think it's important that you know this for a number of reasons. You know, it's very easy to be cynical about the field of academic theology, the ivory tower, you know, and all these guys arguing over how many angels dance on the head of a pin and all of these irrelevant things. It is true, you know, a lot of the cynicism is justified. The ivory tower for decades and decades, indeed centuries, has been a pretty dismal place. It's not a place that has been conducive for genuine Christian scholars, because the way theology has been done is to talk about the problems of Christianity and the problems of faith and how really we can't go back to the Bible and we really can't go back to Christian tradition, and so we need to imagine new ways of resolving our human problems. And so theology in the end became not really theology. It was merely a projection of our own fantasies or illusions or ideals. That is all changed. And I think it's important for Christians in the pew to know this. I bet you did not know that the world's greatest living systematic theologian was sitting in the penthouse suite of the Ivory Tower for the last 20 years, writing extremely fine academic theology for scholars. But this was a man who loved Jesus and loved the Bible and unapologetically did theology in submission to God's word. And he did it so well, he did it so brilliantly, that he was honored by all. He was not the country bumpkin buffoon trying to, just quote the Bible at people. His brilliance, his erudition, his scholarship has made true, genuine Christian scholarship respectable again in the world. There is now a generation, and it's important as Christians for us to know this and to rejoice. There is a generation of young scholars who have been influenced by Professor Webster for many, many years, who take the Bible seriously and who take their faith seriously and take Jesus seriously and take the traditions of the church seriously. And I'm not going to say single-handedly, because it isn't single-handed, but John did most of the heavy lifting for many, many years. And he will be greatly, greatly missed. And it might take a while for him to be missed in the pew, but rest assured, what happens in that ivory tower eventually filters into the church.
Wow. Well, may he rest in peace.
He is resting in peace. He told me one time in an email exchange that when we get to heaven, the Bavinck Society is going to meet, and he will be in charge of the paradisal gin and tonics. So I look forward to having that drink with him someday.
Cool. On to our first major segment. And by the way, we are live, so if you hear us referring to people in the chat stream, they are there. And if you have happened to have missed the live stream, it's because we set it up very last minute. But in all seriousness, sign up on one of our social media sites to get notified of updates. We usually post them sometime during the week. Generally try to be earlier rather than later. But that said, authorities at the Cincinnati Zoo had to make that's next segment. That's after Nerd versus Nerd.
Yeah, I was going to say you're jumping the gun here.
Yeah, that's because I haven't looked at the notes. All right, so the Affordable Care Act strikes again. Last week, a new rule about overtime pay was handed down, and while it seems like a win-win for workers, it is not. Thankfully, here at Dead Reckoning, we have a certified expert to tell you all about it. Hadley, please explain to us how this latest news once again demonstrates the Affordable Care Act is really not quite so affordable.
Right. Well, the concoction is a mixture between new overtime regulations and other regulations in the Affordable Care Act, and that's something I wrote about recently at IWF.org. But the big news here are these new overtime regulations, and people have probably heard something about them because they came out May 18th, but this is something the administration's been working on since July of last year, and they're taking public comment like they're supposed to do with new regulations. But this is huge. I mean, this is really going to change the landscape for employees who were sort of borderline when it comes to whether or not they qualify for overtime pay. And so for people who aren't familiar, the Fair Labor Standards Act is a law that basically tells you if you're a worker who is exempt or not exempt from overtime pay. And if you're not exempt and you work over 40 hours a week, then your boss has to pay you time and a half. So your hourly wage times 1.5, right, for those additional hours. But there's been, the exemption is based on a few different things, or it has been. It used to be based on a salary or wage threshold, a dollar amount that you earned, and also whether or not you had certain duties. There's like a duties test that says, if you're executive or managerial or you're making some decisions that affect the direction of the business, then you would be exempt and you don't get overtime. And that's why usually what happens is people either have a hourly wage job or a salaried job, and most salary jobs are exempt. Right, I don't get paid overtime right. when I work over 40 hours a week for IWF, and most people who could explain their yearly earnings in terms of a salary would be exempt. But now the change from the Department of Labor is essentially that threshold for earnings for hourly workers has been increased, almost doubled, really. I mean, it's a huge increase. Now, this is going to take effect on December 1st of this year, but anybody who's making less than $47,476 a year could be removed from the so-called exempt category, right? And so their boss might be on the hook for paying them overtime. And this is going to have a lot of effects on our workplace. So one of the effects on health insurance, we can talk about that later, but the big change is millions more people are now going to be eligible for overtime pay.
So this is almost like, think of it in terms of, this is a minimum wage hike for salaried employees in some ways.
Yeah.
So, now it's
yeah.
like for an employer to not have to pay you overtime, he's going to have to pay you a minimum of $47,500, right? So that the floor has just been raised if he
right.
wants to keep from paying overtime. Is that right?
Right. But here's the thing. We know that there are things that employers can do to protect themselves from the cost of these new regulations. First of all, new regulations always come with a compliance cost. And in the case of these particular rules, I mean, the measuring of how many hours per week various workers work is a huge compliance cost for businesses. And the National Retail Federation estimated this particular change is going to cost about $9 billion to all of the employers in the country, just compliance. So we're not even talking about, money moving from the employer's pockets to his employees' pockets. We're just talking about compliance.
Stop there. Okay, so you just said compliance in terms of measuring the number of hours. So we're talking about buying time clocks? I mean, what are you talking about in terms of compliance?
Right, and
costs?
hiring additional, HR representatives or attorneys to help sort through which employees are eligible or not eligible, to measure how many hours per week those people are working, to try to sort through what other exemptions might still exist within the context of the new regulations and so forth. So
$9 billion.
Yeah, Yeah.
Or you hire more people to work part-time hourly positions.
Exactly. So you can, just like we saw with the Affordable Care Act's employer mandate, and, it couldn't be the same. It couldn't be simple. But of course, the employer mandate applies to people who work over 30 hours a week. And the overtime rules affect people who work over 40 hours a week. But employers can always say, I'd rather keep you making less than $47,000 a year and not give you that additional raise
That's it right
of
there.
$1,000, or I can just keep you working at an hourly threshold of 39 hours a week and tell you never ever come in for overtime. I'll hire someone else to pick up that
The
additional
slack.
shift.
That's it right there.
Right. And so the idea that this is just going to be really simple and straightforward, and that employers are going to be like, oh, shucks, now I have to pay a bunch more of my workers a bunch more money. That's a false idea of what's really going to happen. And that's usually the case with economic regulations. There's an intention, and then there's the unintended consequences. And so
and in
I'm
this
afraid
case,
we're going to see a lot of that here.
And in this case, and as is so often the case, the unintended consequences simply zero out your intended benefit, right? I mean, you're actually getting you're getting the opposite of what you're looking for here, right?
Right. In some cases, there's more harm than help going
Hadley,
on.
is there actually a problem? We talked about this last week with the whole non-gender bathrooms. Is there actually a problem to be solving right now?
Well, I think that I think that a lot of this is very political, obviously, but I've been thinking about this process, and I think a lot of it is the administration trying to signal what side they're on, and so just to break this down, I'm trying to explain this thought very simply. I think a lot of our division on economic policy positions comes down to this question. Do you believe that employees and employers constantly have different and opposed interests? Or do you believe that sometimes employers and employees can have mutual interests and mutual benefit, for example, through economic growth, wage growth, increased profits, and so forth? So to me, our economic divisions in this country, at least when it comes to policy, boils down to, do you think that you and your boss are always on the opposite side of the table, always with your interests opposed? Or do you understand that sometimes the business owner, the boss, when he benefits, you can benefit too? And I think that that's sort of what's happening here with the political signaling. The administration wants to paint a picture of our economy as a zero-sum game, as a fixed pie, as one where people's interests are always opposed, whether it's men versus women in the wage gap, or socioeconomic classes, the wealthy and the not-so-wealthy, the haves and have-nots, or in this case, your boss versus the employees. And I think we talked about with the transgender bathrooms, do you have any faith that people, good, well-meaning people, individuals, citizens, can work these things out between them, among them? Or do you think that there needs to be a third party involved, and that third party being the government telling everybody where to go to the bathroom and how much they need to pay their workers and how much benefits they need to give their workers and so forth?
It's also the third party that has the power to enforce it, right? So it's a coercive third party.
Right.
This is like in ancient Greek plays, they had what they called the god of the machine, the deus ex machina. And what would happen in these Greek plays is that the plot would get too complicated. And so at the end of the play, they would literally have an actor come down, descend onto the stage like Apollo or Athena would show up and then just say, okay, here's the way it is. You did, and they just kind of sort it out. It's sort of, we have this deus ex machina idea of government where if there are opposed interests, it can't be worked out without the government doing it with the force of law.
Yeah, and I think there's another issue at play that kind of stems to a deeper indicator of what's going on in our culture today anyway, which kind of, it's what's happening everywhere, is that there's this underlying presumption that you're getting screwed over. Somebody is screwing you over right now.
Right.
And if it's not a church, if it's not a school, it's your employer. Your employees try to screw you. I just made a comment on the chat line, on the chat window, that, it's like every salaried position I've ever had, I've never had to really fill out a time card. If you do, you put down 40. The idea behind it was, your employer trusts you that you have you are doing what needs to get done for the betterment of the company, the betterment of your job, which are generally are two what did you the term you use? It's your like-minded interests.
Mutual
interests. Those things go together. And then, there might be the time where you take a 2-hour lunch. But that's okay because you're getting your job done. To me, it was a step. It was kind of always a step below some sort of like monetary ownership in the stock of a company or an employee stock program or something. It's like you have a vested interest in this company and you want to make it succeed as much as the owner does. But that's not happening. It's like they're forcing on you now, saying, okay, as an employee, you're going to be treated now like they're trying to screw you over. You're going to be forced to be treated that way.
I think
as an employer, you're going to be treated the same way, that you are trying to screw your employees over. I don't want to screw anybody over as an employer.
I really like, Hadley, how you kind of probably simplistically, but sometimes simplistic explanations are helpful to get our heads around things, and how you put that. Is management and labor always opposed? Or can they have mutual interests? I think a couple of things going on here. I think that this all ties into the history of labor unions in this country, where that really was the guiding lodestar principle, is that we have this oppressed people group, workers, who need to be liberated by the government because they're constantly getting screwed over. Now, were a lot of workers, when unions arose in the United States of America, were there issues and problems that had to be resolved? Were there workers being exploited? Of course. I mean, this is a fallen world. Oppression really does happen. So please don't misinterpret me as saying that there never is management-employee dysfunction and there's legitimate oppression that goes on. I worked for in a job that was I was a member of the Teamsters Union, and I worked in a work environment that I could only describe the relationship between management and workers as absolutely toxic. And it was absolutely toxic because of this very thing you're pointing out, Hadley, that the workers believed that everything management does was to screw them over. And it was just absolutely incredible. I mean, talking the grievances that would get filed would blow your mind, okay, over the silliest things. But it was a toxic work environment, and because of that very thing. But I think it also goes deeper, and I think that we talked about it with respect to the bathroom war issue, and that is that I think that leftism in this country operates on the basis that there's always an oppressed group that must be liberated. And we must do something for them for their own good. And this is always the modus operandi of a government that doesn't respect its boundaries and its limits and its jurisdiction, that it's always intruding to liberate some perceived oppressed people group. And even when you don't have an oppressed people group or a legitimately oppressed people group, you have to invent it.
Right. And I don't have a lot of people think about unions as a political, institution of the left, but I don't have anything against unions when it comes to the theory of how unions are supposed to work for collective bargaining purposes, for the protection of workers' interests. I get that. It's just when unions do dirty things, like trying to make it a legal requirement that members of certain professions join the union and contribute dues, even if those people don't want to join the union, that's where it becomes an issue for me. But otherwise, if you want to have a union and you want to work together, you want to collectively bargain and sort of bond together as a group of working people, then that's one way to exercise your power, is together. And another way, the most important way that workers can exercise their power in a free labor market, is to say, I don't like that offer, what you're offering me in terms of compensation. I'm going to go to the other guy. I'm going to go to your competition and work for him for a better wage and for a better set of a compensation package. So the key here is, do we have a free labor market, and do workers have any choice? Do workers have any opportunity to say, I don't like what I'm getting here, I'm going to go somewhere else? Because what we've seen in the economy since the recession is a lack of jobs available. And when you have a lack of jobs available, that takes away the power of workers to say, you know what, I can find work elsewhere. So it's understandable why people feel like they're getting screwed when wages are stagnant and they don't have a lot of options because there's not a lot of new jobs being created, especially for people who maybe worked in certain industries that have lost hundreds of thousands of jobs that haven't ever been returned. I'm thinking manufacturing here, a lot of other blue collar jobs. So I understand why people might feel that way, but the reality is there's a better solution than having government step in with these regulations that, as we discussed earlier, may actually backfire on the very workers that they're intended to help. The better way to solve this problem would be to have robust economic growth, which produces jobs as a byproduct. When you have job growth, you have wage growth, because employees, yet again, finally have some kind of power to say, I can go work for your competition. And workers, a lot of workers don't feel like they can do that right now because the competition isn't hiring. Nobody's hiring.
Economics 201.
And I love what you said about unions too, Hadley. I mean, what you really said is that you're in favor of voluntary association, and it's that notion of voluntary. It's the cardinal sin of free market, a free market approach to economics, according to the left, is that a free market does not ensure equality of outcomes for everybody. If you're going to have equality, then it can't be free, and so it cannot be voluntary. It can't be purely voluntary. And that's, obviously, you're right about unions forcing workers to negotiate, forcing them to join a union is a problem. But I'm saying it's of a piece with the ideology that freedom by its very nature produces disparate outcomes. You don't get equal outcomes for everybody in a free market. And if equality is your god, if you've got to have equality, then you have to be opposed to freedom. You have to be opposed to a free market. It's just a core principle.
Another phenomenon that we've seen, and this brings it back to the Affordable Care Act, but one reason why wages have been stagnant for so many people is because when the government mandates that you provide health insurance coverage for your employees, and when the cost of that health insurance goes up every single year, and when the cost is being driven up by government regulations that say you can't just provide any health insurance, you have to provide health insurance that covers this, that, and the other, a whole laundry list of things, well, then it's no wonder that any extra money that employers might have to increase their labor budget and increase what they're paying their employees is going directly into benefits. And another possible result of these overtime regulations is that pool of money, that bucket of money that employers have to pay workers, whether it's benefits or wages, it's the same bucket of money. Okay,
right.
So if you shift the bucket of money towards wages and you say, we got millions more people who qualify for overtime now, well, that leaves fewer dollars left over for the benefits that the government is mandating that employers pay. So there is this option. I hate to even mention this, but the option to violate the employer mandate, you could pay $2,000 or $3,000 a year in penalties for not offering health insurance to your employees, instead of paying, what's the average employer-sponsored family premium these days? $17,000 a year. So you could pay $17,000 a year for each worker to have health insurance and his family to have health insurance, or you could just pay $2,000 or $3,000 a year.
For the penalty, right?
Yeah. And I'm afraid that that's what these rules are going to encourage.
And then, on top of all of that, we should not overlook the fact that employers are not going to simply take this burden of these increased costs and pay them out of the goodness of their hearts. They're going to get that money from somewhere. And you know where they get it? They get it from the consumer. Your prices go up. Your price for services go up. The consumer ends up paying for all of it at the end of the day. This is That is economics 101. Once the
Yeah.
government increases the cost of doing business, that cost gets passed on to the consumer because they got to stay in business.
If you can understand the concept behind minimum wage, it's the same concept behind health insurance mandates, paid family leave mandates, regulations on overtime. Exactly. It's the same concept. So it really, I mean, that's one reason why the minimum wage concept is so important, because there will be some people who benefit. You know, whenever there's a new regulation, in the short term, it can serve some people well, but there are other people who will be harmed by it. And especially when it comes to minimum wage, the people who are harmed first are the people who have no income, no job in the first place, because you're taking the first rungs of the economic ladder and you're cutting them out from underneath their feet.
Yeah, you're moving it
Exactly.
higher.
And so, you know, I very much believe that we should create an economic policy that fosters growth. And I also think that we should, in a wealthy, civilized, developed country like the United States, we should be concerned about how our economic policy affects those at the very bottom of the economic ladder. But the thing about minimum wage is that's not the people who are getting helped. Those people, in fact, are being hurt, because the number one problem among people who are the poorest of the poor in this country is that they don't have any income or any job, because the real minimum wage is always zero. That's what those people are earning. They don't have any job, any income. You're not helping them by increasing the minimum wage. You may help some workers, you know, especially teenagers who take summer jobs earning minimum wage. But those teenagers may be coming home to a 5-bedroom house where mom and dad are both earning 6 figures. Okay. Mm-hmm. You're not necessarily helping the poorest of the poor when you want to increase minimum wage.
Mic drop.
Well,
Metaphorical.
you know, it's nice that we have a policy expert on this show who can speak intelligently about these things, because Hadley gets in the weeds. Did you notice, Hadley, how you asked what does it cost, and the average cost for an employer to give health insurance to a worker and his family, and I just happened to know $17,400 off the top of my head. You know how I know that?
Did you read my blog?
Because I read an editorial by you in which you taught me that figure. So thank you. Good. You helped me be informed.
For single coverage, the cost in 2015 was about $6,000, $251 per worker per year. Wow. So even if you're only providing coverage for a single worker,
$500 a month.
Yeah, but the cost of the penalty is so much less, you know, unless you're a group of nuns and you're not providing birth control, and then you're paying $36,000 in penalties, which still just blows my mind. That it's like one penalty for not providing health insurance at all, and then it's a much, much higher penalty, like 10 times the penalty.
Incredible.
If you want to provide health insurance but not the birth control part. It's mind-blowing.
That's mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
You guys, when we come back, we're going to talk Cincinnati Zoo, and then a little bit later on in the show, Pakistan.
Yes.
And treatment of women who want to have sex with you.
That's going to be a fun segment.
That is going to be a fun segment, so prep your questions. But first, everybody's favorite part of the show. Nerd versus Nerd. Our producer Remley finds clever terms that are being used around the web by a new generation of digitally literate children. And she posted up here, gives a definition, the actual real definition of this. And I pit Brian and Hadley.
The funnest definition.
Or the funnest definition. Take your pick. And those of you in the chat stream, feel free to hammer away as well. So today's word, you guys, is li-fi.
Say it again.
Today's word is li-fi.
Li-fi.
Li-fi. And with that, Brian and Hadley will contemplate the recesses of their witty brains and knowledgeable brains.
All right, I got mine.
Okay.
Li-fi is when you set up your home Wi-Fi network and you name it FBI surveillance van.
It's good.
So all your neighbors get on to search for a network and they see the FBI surveillance van.
Oh, man.
That's Li-fi.
Li-fi, and I'm gonna keep an eyeball on the chat window here and see what the smart kids chat come up with.
I'm gonna say that Li-fi is a term applied to a Wi-Fi network that you think that you can get on, but you can't.
Oh, she's probably right.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a good
right.
one.
And you think you know the passcode.
You've been in that situation before. You're like
Yeah.
in this airport in Detroit or something.
Yes.
You're like, oh, Detroit Airport network. My phone's connected.
Detroit
awesome. And then you
Airport
try
Wi-Fi.
to go
No. Even
to
worse.
any pages, and it's like, no, I can't go to any pages.
Even worse, you're in the airport and you're just like, oh, sweet, there's the free public Wi-Fi network, and you click on it, and up pops this Boingo hotspot page.
Oh, I hate that.
Pay me $10, and I'll let you check your email. That's Li-Fi. Free public Wi-Fi run by Boingo. That's Li-Fi.
Well, you guys are all mostly correct. Here's what I have online for the record. Becca says Wi-Fi that lies, which is good. Patrick Denny, touche, buddy, touche. Low intensity live streaming technology, given the problems earlier in the show. Linda, again, as on the bandwagon. Li-Fi is when video streaming doesn't work. Okay, guys, we get it.
We get it.
We
You're
get it.
upset.
Wi-Fi that is open. Brian, this is yours. Wi-Fi that is open, but then it has a password. And Remley, of course, burning us when Dead Reckoning Radio says it's going to be live at 12 and isn't. Okay, you guys, I'm going to stop.
All right.
I'm reading. Okay, we get it. We get it. We get it.
We're sorry. We apologize.
We apologize.
You know what? No
but if
ifs,
it wasn't for
no ifs, buts, or maybes. We are sorry for the technical difficulties. We will endeavor with everything in our being to never let that happen again. We will not leave you hanging. We will try not to leave you hanging.
sometimes
we really apologize.
things
Will you
sometimes
please
things are
forgive
out of our
us?
control. You know, we're using a lot of different technologies. Some of them new. We got
Trying to get them all to work
Wi-Fi.
together.
I'm totally nulling and voiding.
Exactly.
our
Don't
apology.
nullify the apology.
All right, Li-Fi, the real term is when your phone or tablet indicates that you are connected to a wireless network. However, you are still unable to load web pages or use any internet services with your device.
Hadley nailed it.
Yes, Brian, you were close.
Hadley absolutely nailed it.
Hadley
I liked
nailed
FBI surveillance van myself. I thought that was clever for for Li-Fi.
I think CIA, no, TSA. TSA surveillance. I can't get on the network. That's 'cause nothing TSA does works.
NSA.
I was making a TSA joke. You guys missed it.
I missed the TSA joke.
Because you try to get onto their network and it doesn't work. Nothing TSA does work. Works. All right, so JR's going to stay off the stage. Get off the stage! All right. Authorities at the Cincinnati Zoo had to make a quick decision to save a life of a young boy who fell or climbed, depending on who you believe. I'm not going to blame the parent. I have kids. That would be my child. Yeah. They climbed into the gorilla exhibit. 17-year-old gorilla Harambe somewhat violently dragged the boy around the enclosure, and the zoo security team shot the animal dead. But cue outrage stage right. The mob quickly gathered online, accusing zookeepers of being murderers and demanding that the parents be held accountable for the death of sweet Harambe. The outrage rivals the trophy killing of Zimbabwean lion by a Minnesota dentist a few years ago.
I remember that.
Guys, 140 some odd million babies are killed all the time.
It's true.
But God,
A gorilla.
If this child had died, it would have been a far better death.
Ooh, ow, Jay. Not the way to set the table there, bro. That's depressing.
I am sitting down at the table they have already set. Thank you.
It's a tragic situation that could have been vastly more tragic. It would have been infinitely more tragic had the young boy who had crawled into the gorilla enclosure been killed by the gorilla. So we are grateful that that did not happen. The outrage as to the shooting of the gorilla, I think, says a lot of things. My friend, our friend Wesley Smith, Mr. Human Exceptionalism himself, makes this rather chilling and disturbing observation about the mob that has arisen protesting the death of Harambe. Wesley Smith writes, here's the most disturbing part. I suspect many people are more emotional about the killing of the gorilla than they would have been had the child been killed. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I suspect Wesley's probably right. I think he's probably onto something there. The emotion that is being exhibited here is incommensurate with the actual event that happened. Wesley also points out that only humans would care so much about a killed gorilla. Our empathy is one of the aspects of our natures that make us exceptional. Which I thought was an excellent point.
That is phenomenal. Props, Wesley.
I have had a thought about this, and it is, what is it about our culture that people cannot accept that sometimes bad things just happen?
Yeah, right.
That there's got to be somebody to blame. There's got to be some bad actor. It's got to be somebody's fault, you know? Because it's the parents' fault, it's the kids' fault, it's the gorilla's fault, it's the zookeeper's fault. You know, somebody's fault here. You know, and I'm not saying out the window with accountability and let's not, you know, ever give any thought to why things happen or how things might have happened differently. I get that. But this just seemed like a unfortunate series of events to me, you know?
Right.
It's unfortunate the kid got somewhere he shouldn't have been. It's unfortunate that it created a legitimately scary situation, and it's unfortunate that Harambe the gorilla had to die. You know, all those things are, to me, unfortunate, maybe even tragic, but not necessarily chips in a blame game that I need to play, you know? But I think a lot of the outrage and response to it is, I think we see a lot of virtue signaling going on here.
Right.
I think whom we choose to blame, if we're trying to lay blame here or there in this series of events, is more about what we want other people to think about us and where our priorities are than it is about actually deciphering what, you know, what this means, you know.
Yeah.
It's not about what it means. It's about how are my Facebook friends or my Instagram friends going to perceive me when I say something about this.
And my virtue and how much I love animals and how much I love gorillas. Right. And, you know, I mean,
right.
You know, you can love animals and love gorillas, but still at the same time realize that the life of that human child is infinitely more valuable than the life of the gorilla. Because human beings are exceptional. And, you know, and there's a lot of, it's a confluence of events. It's sort of like the perfect storm, right? They're like, well, why didn't they tranquilize the gorilla? Well, apparently the 800-pound gorilla, the tranquilizer wouldn't work fast enough. This was a very, very, very touchy situation. The gorilla was getting agitated, and who knows what could have happened. The zookeepers and the security team felt that this was the resort that had to be taken. Regarding the kind of vitriol and outrage directed toward the parents of this child, it's just tragic to me. I'm not going to deny for one moment there are unruly kids. There are kids who have no respect for authority. I mean, you see them all over the place. Kids who are out of control, and parents cannot get them to do what they need to do. Of course, we all understand that. But I want to say on the other hand, this is a zoo. This is a facility in which you are keeping wild animals. There is a certain amount of risk that you undertake when you want to have an enclosure full of wild animals.
They have insurance policies
and then
for this.
You let families in, okay? Who is the burden on here? Who is really negligent? If you have a gorilla pen that was able to allow a small child to crawl into it, are we? If we are gonna push some blame chips out onto the table, as Hadley was saying, like who's to blame here? Sure, maybe the kid had bad parents and never disciplined him, and he was out of control. Maybe true, but it seems to me the gorilla's share of the chips that should be pushed out on the blame table would be a zoo that has an enclosure that can be breached
by a 4-year-old.
4-year-old. Really?
I think we got to do some privilege checking here too, like first world problems, that we do have things called zoos, and that is where we put wild animals, because there are some parts of the world where wild animals, especially animals like gorillas that weigh hundreds of pounds, or lions like the one that the dentist shot in Africa, do pose a real threat to the village, a real threat to human life. And we as a society, I think, have just become so distant, separated from the risk of being attacked by wild animals like this. Even when it comes to our food, we're eating like chicken, pig, cows. Most people have no idea what the slaughtering process is like for those animals, and where that food comes from. And then they want to get really upset about it when they see how this meat is farmed, but then we're eating, the thing is, back when people farmed their own animals and had to slaughter their own animals, they knew exactly how that food got in front of them on a plate, know? Right. But we have so much separation between us and the natural world now. I mean, most of us spend most of our days inside air conditioning, and heating, and we have all these comforts. We've made very comfortable homes for ourselves as humans, that when we do have an encounter with something like a gorilla, people are prone to think, well, that's such a cute, friendly gorilla. The only gorillas we've ever seen have been in movies, right. Right. But this is a very dangerous animal, a very powerful animal, and an animal that we have not always, historically as humans had, these cute impressions of. That they're horrifying.
Yeah, you're making a great point. This is such a first world problem, which actually makes the virtue signaling going on even, that much worse, right?
Yeah.
I'm signaling my virtues from the comfort of my
I like to think of
habitat.
Most gorillas are not gorillas in the mist. They're more like Michael Crichton's Congo.
Yeah, or King Kong.
King Kong. Yeah, there's a bad gorilla. The dentist one is interesting too in terms of the privilege thing. The reason he was shot is because he was out that particular lion was outside of its preserve. Its zoo, and that was the zoo. Like the zoo has no fences, no walls, no anything else. And then the controversy was, well, was he drawn out by the guide or not?
Right.
So anyway.
We deal with this all the time, Hadley, living as we do sort of at the gateway to Yellowstone National Park. And it is just getting absolutely absurd how people view and see wildlife. These are wild animals. Every single year, people are getting gored by bison, okay? Because if you go to Yellowstone National Park, there are more bison than people, okay? I mean, they're gigantic herds, and they're lounging around on the lawn outside the lodge, okay? Now, the authorities, the park authorities, have taken it upon themselves to basically plaster signs on every available surface in Yellowstone National Park that says, do not approach the bison. Do not approach the bison. Because you know what? They don't look like they're looking at you. They don't look like they're paying any attention to you until you take that one step too far. And then they're on top of you before you know it. Okay, they move a lot faster than you think they do. So then just recently, this foreign couple found
it's always a Japanese tourist.
It wasn't, or Swedish or something.
Well, it's
they
always a Swedish
showed up
tourist.
at a ranger station. They showed up at a ranger station with a baby bison in the back of their SUV, and because they were afraid that it was cold and it needed help.
Oh my gosh.
And they brought it to a ranger station. This really happened, people. They had found it. It didn't have its mom, and they picked it up and put it in their SUV. sadly, speaking of tragedy, the Rangers had to put the bison down, the baby bison. They tried several times to reintroduce it to their herd, and it was completely rejected by the herd. So
Because of these well-meaning, super social, weird, privileged white Swedes.
Look, it's this, and then I just saw just yesterday a Facebook video of a woman nearly getting trampled by an elk in Yellowstone Park, and they posted it on Facebook to laugh about it. Oh, look what happened to us. You're so right, Hadley. We are so removed from the natural world and the way the brutal red in tooth and claw nature is that we think it is Disney. We think it's Disneyland, and we can go to Yellowstone and we can just walk up and pet the bison or give it a nice hug. It's just incredible. So zoos are very much a first world phenomenon.
It's only a matter of time before they shut down Yellowstone. Tourists are not allowed to go through
they're
Yellowstone.
it's getting worse. It seems to be getting worse. Yeah. We just had another incident of some Canadian filmmakers who came down. And
they should know
themselves.
better.
Yeah, they filmed themselves bragging about how they walked off the path in the hot springs, and they were contaminating hot pots in these really sensitive ecosystems, and they were filming themselves doing this. And I think there are charges out for them actually because they were flagrant about it.
Seriously, this whole conversation is ridiculous. In the words of Matt Walsh, while you were crying over a dead ape, 125,000 babies were just murdered. Go home and get your upside down screwed upness fixed, people.
Wow. Tell us how you really feel, Jay.
It's so backwards. The ethics and morality has been. I was listening to. I might have posted it on my Twitter. I might be back on Twitter. I posted on my Twitter about a Gavin McInnes talking about the gender, some of the transgender bathrooms and things. And he was talking about how the morality and the ethics in the United States are completely reversed. Everything that was good and ethical and moral has been exchanged for everything that's disgusting. He's talking about pedophiles, celebrating the salon, celebrating pedophiles.
Yep.
We're celebrating this guy lusting after a 5-year-old girl. This is exactly the same thing. We're celebrating the death of an ape
while ignoring
while being like, let's
babies,
murder all these babies in the world. I mean, I get it, and I could go, but I'm gonna stop because it's time. It's time to lighten the mood.
Let's lighten the mood.
Not the Onion News, the segment of the show where Remley pulls up 2 headlines. I wish that last headline I read was not the Onion, but it's true. Pulls 2 headlines. One is fake and one is real.
My favorite game.
Yes, we get to decide which one is fake and which one is real. This is a very simple game, and those of you on our live stream, feel free to vote your team, either Team Hadley,
come on, people,
or Team Brian, or Team Remley. Somebody had a secondary third teammate or something.
Oh, cool. Well,
it's never a Team
what about
J.
Team J?
I'm the host.
Listen,
I don't play.
Remley's-
This is strategic. This was tactical. I knew I couldn't compete with your guys' intellect, so I made myself the host.
I just feel bad, guys. I mean, I know that Remley's prettier than me and all, but, I just never have any fans on the live stream.
That's not true, Brian. You have fans.
I have a few, but you always have more than me. It makes me insecure. Not really. I'm just teasing.
Inequality. You should vote for Sanders.
You guys. Okay, here's the first headline. Drug dealer complains burritos laced with meth had no guacamole.
Read that one again. Just read it again.
Drug dealer
in all its glory.
Drug dealer complains burritos laced with meth had no guacamole.
Okay. All right.
Headline number 2. Baker allowed to pay child support in pizza.
Oh my goodness, these are hard.
Baker allowed to pay child support in pizza.
I think the first one is real.
A drug dealer complains burritos laced with meth had no guac.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you're probably right, Hadley, because it would occur to me that he probably did so while himself high on methamphetamine. And that might explain the idiocy of him complaining about his burrito not having guacamole.
I want a taco right now.
That really, so do I. No, but that makes sense. Baker paying child support with pizza. I highly doubt it, but for the sake of making the game fun, I'm going to say that this guy owns a pizzeria, and his business is struggling. And he's not making a great deal of money. And so
you're giving the whole storyline behind it.
He got a special dispensation from the judge that he could contribute to the feeding of his children with the fruits of his labors in his bakery. So that him providing pizza will count towards his outstanding child support obligations. I think that's a real story, and I'm sticking to it.
Megan online goes, no guac. I respect his priorities. Guac más bueno que meth.
Don't even try.
All right. Right. So we've got a lot. Most of the votes are for burritos. Burritos and meth. Mexican burritos and meth. So let's see if we have any non-burrito meth. No, we don't.
Oh, that's
Linda
right.
said go pizza.
That's
right.
right.
She did. Oh, you're right. She did.
Casey mentions that story at that tax filing company here in Billings, Montana, where somebody laced the coffee with meth.
You guys, we have such a
that actually happened. We have
such a huge
here.
meth problem here. It's disturbing. Okay, your answer is the couple Nicola Toso and Nicoletta Zuin divorced in 2002. By 2008, as Italy was hit by a deep economic crisis, the pizza baker, who had since remarried and had 3 more children, began struggling to make ends meet.
My story was even right.
Yeah.
From 2008 to 2010, he offered his ex-wife free food instead of the 400 euros a month stipulated in her divorce agreement. At the time, his daughter was 12.
She likes pizza. She's
Wow.
12.
You know, I would take free pizza from an Italian pizza guy.
Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Man, I was really thinking about this in the American context, and I was thinking, no way some American judge would let somebody do that. But in Italy, sure.
Sure.
Why
So
not?
what's the rest of the story? Was this a legal thing? Did they have to go before a judge, or did the ex-wife just agree to it?
A court has ruled that child support can be paid in the form of pizza after the divorce baker paid him that. In his defense, attorney Sonia Della Greca, sounds like a fake name,
Della Greca.
argued
It's Italian.
argued that the pizza baker had truly fallen on hard times and had amassed big debts to the point he was forced to close his business in 2010 after being unable to pay vendors and employees. Ms. Della Greca also pointed out that he had held up all of his other custody obligations, not missing visits and helping his daughter develop positive relations with his new partner and her 3 new half-siblings. Facts also established in the daughter's deposition in the father's defense. So evidently went to court. Why? His ex-wife had filed a criminal complaint.
Oh, for not paying the child support.
For paying him pizza instead of child support. So
I can't believe how I
you even nailed
that was epic.
You even nailed the story.
I nailed the
That was
story.
epic, Brian.
Epic. Thank you,
Either
Team
way,
Brian. Did I win any?
yeah.
Did I win any fans? Come on.
Hey Molly, for the record, if I demand child support from you because it's a new era where if we get a divorce, it's your fault and you're gonna be paying, I'll take pizza.
I got some mad applause from Patrick on the live stream. Kudos to you, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Either way, this guy had to fork over the dough. I'm so funny.
Burn! Who knew? The policy wonk is a comedian. Oh, man.
That's about as good as my jokes get, everybody.
That was so bad.
That was awesome.
So bad.
Yeah.
Okay, that was fun. Back to some heavy, I guess. An influential public policy advisory group in Pakistan recently released their recommendations for how men should handle the situation of having a wife who refuses to have sex or chooses her own fashion style. The Council of Islamic Ideology, a group often sought out by the Pakistani government, now advises that husbands lightly beat their wives to force compliance. The council went to detailed lengths to provide guidelines for how to do this. Hit her in areas where the skin is not too thick or too thin. Do not use a shoe or a broom on the head, or hit her on the nose or the eyes. And do not break any bones or cut her skin or leave any marks. Do not hit her vindictively, but only for reminding her of her religious duties. Wow, that's a group of Prince Charmings right there. Speaking of the Disneyland discussion on the chat window.
Wow.
Guys.
Wow.
Hadley, you'd be the one getting beat by Aaron, so you can start the discussion.
I know. I'm just like thanking God that this is like, I can't even imagine what it would be like to even think for a second that my husband was going to hit me. You know, like I just have a very wonderful, blessed life, you know, and I know that domestic abuse happens in the United States too, you know, so
Sure.
let's not pretend like this doesn't happen right here at home. But the idea that people who are like soberly discussing, you know, how-tos when it comes to marriage, like that they would condone this kind of stuff, it's just mind-blowing to me. And I guess, you know, this is just a testimony to what how far our civilization has come and how wonderful it is to be a woman in America in 2016 with a Christian husband in a home that, you know, I feel safe and loved and cherished. But my first thought is I can't conceive of what my life would be like if I lived in fear of my husband in this way.
Incredible. Yeah, it's how far we've come, and it is how far Pakistan has not come. I mean, you realize this is an advance on previous practice. So all of those.
Wait, this is an advance?
Sure, this is how to treat her humanely, right? So there's a reason they have in there.
Like she's a dog or something.
Don't whack her with a shoe or a broom on the head.
As Casey points out on the live stream, the real reason for the hijab is just to cover up the beatings.
Well, yeah, that's actually a not so subtle secret.
I want to know what the people who are upset about the gorilla feel about this.
There you go, Hadley. That's right.
They couldn't handle it this far into our show.
I am struck by. I'm struck. Number one, this is a serious. This would be the equivalent of a think tank in Pakistan. I mean, making this policy proposal, and the whole idea is to make this part of Pakistani law, that a husband has the right to lightly beat his wife if she does not perform sexually as he wishes. So that just in and of itself is just incredible that this would be something promoted. But the scarier thought is that the Pakistani government may well adopt these resolutions. You think the loopholes are big enough to drive a truck through? Who's gonna enforce what's light beating and what isn't? It's just amazing.
Or what's vindictive and what's not.
Yeah, what's vindictive or not. I like what you said, Adley. It's a time to be very grateful for where we live and grateful for the Christian influence our own culture enjoys, because dignity for women is a product of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and contrary to conventional wisdom or popular belief, the idea that Christianity and Judaism crushed women and kept them in their place is absolute nonsense. You can go to one of the most ancient legal codes known to man. You can find it in Exodus chapter 20. It's more commonly known as the Ten Commandments, where you find a command like honor your father and your mother. Unprecedented in ancient Near Eastern literature or practice or legal codes. The place of women in the Judeo-Christian tradition is one of elevated status, not put down. And we enjoy the fruits of that. Even today, with a widespread rejection of that tradition, we still enjoy the fruits and the benefits and blessings of it. The other thing that just really strikes me is how devoid of grace Islam is. It's just devoid of grace. Christianity is the religion that says we love him because he first loved us. That self-sacrificing love brings about love in return. I got an idea for you, Muslim husband, who has poor marital relations. Why don't you lay down your life for her? Why don't you serve her? Why don't you bless her and see what happens to your marriage? You know what? Islam does not have a notion of real grace.
No.
Islam means submission. That is what the literal word means, is submission. The only resort these people have with a dysfunctional relationship is violence. Even in the sanctuary of their own home between husband and wife. Can't get what you want? We'll authorize you to, smack her around a little bit, Just don't leave any mark. That is the answer that Islam has to the dysfunction of human relationships. And it is pathetic. And it is egregious. And it's wicked. I'll call it what it is. It's wicked. God, the real God, the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, shows us how it's done. That when we were sinners and we had a dysfunctional relationship, he sent his Son to lay down his life for us, to serve us. We love because he first loved us. Grace and mercy brings about real restoration. And Islam doesn't have it. And this is simply another exhibit.
Somebody brought up on the live stream, actually it was Patrick, said maybe this is an incremental step towards eliminating or outlawing abuse. And I think that is, I don't really know what the law says right now in Pakistan, or maybe this council is recommending something that would be a move in the right direction. Is that something to consider? That, from our perspective and our culture, this seems heinous, but maybe coming from the opposite end of the spectrum, this does represent progress?
We need to keep in mind, and I'm getting this from the NBC News, that those who promote freedom and dignity for women in Pakistan, in other words, the opposition groups, the groups that want human rights for women in Pakistan, are screaming bloody murder about this. Okay, so they're not seeing this as, this is a move in the right direction. They see this as a move in exactly the wrong direction. So that's the news from the ground.
All right.
So that's our weekly reminder that no, kids, not all cultures are equally cool.
Have you guys seen the story about the man who killed an OBGYN after this doctor assisted his wife in birth because he had seen his wife naked?
Yes, I saw the headline. I did not see the story.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've seen that story getting passed around a lot on the internet, and I haven't read it yet.
Is it
that
true?
Just seemed so off-putting to me. I guess because my husband is a doctor and he probably sees a lot of people naked. I just thought, man, this is not a concern that I have.
I believe it was a Muslim man who
right.
And I think they had, if I'm recalling, I think I read like the tagline or something. I saw a headline that said tagline. I think that they had a female OBGYN, but this might have been, an intern or some man ended up having to assist, and the Muslim father apparently killed the doctor over that. I mean, it's just absolutely, this is just wicked.
Well, to close out the show, guys, North Korea still exists. More specifically, American missionary Kenneth Bay is set to release a new book on his experience of being held captive for 735 days in this particular communist regime. He was watched continuously by 30 guards. My wife was just telling me this morning. She's like, I read this obscure article about Kim Jong-un's aunt who's living in the United States, whose husband wants to go back, and it's just wild. He was watched continuously by 30 guards at the labor camp, and he details how they especially wanted to know all about America. Is it true, for instance, that everybody owns a car? You know, and
They couldn't believe it.
they couldn't believe it. And I couldn't quite get over how, you know, Kim Jong-un and his older brother were educated in what, Sweden or Norway? They spent time in France and England, all these and yet they were so indoctrinated by whatever this is that they went back to oppress their people until
it's about power.
lies.
It's about power with them.
But you're that drunk with power. I mean, you are that drunk that you have no soul, no compassion for anybody else. It's just mind-blowing.
You do have a soul. It's just severely deformed.
No, you don't have a soul at that point.
It's deformed.
It's gone.
No,
it's
there's
toast.
a soul.
No.
Ask a theologian. Yes, Kim Jong-un does have a soul. You know, it's just another reminder, you know. We can be very cynical and skeptical of the trials that we're undergoing culturally in our place and our time, but it still remains true that the world's flow of refugees and people seeking asylum, the direction of that flow goes one direction. There are not boatloads of Americans washing up on the shores of North Korea looking for help, okay? So go ahead,
Yeah.
Hadley.
Well, and part of the reason we can celebrate is that there were boatloads of American soldiers who did end up in Europe during World War II. You know, this kind of ties into Memorial Day for me, that we have a culture that we can celebrate and be free. And some people are bothered by, you know, the expression Happy Memorial Day because it was just yesterday. And some people say it's not a happy holiday, it's for remembering. And I understand that, you know, impulse, but it is a happy Memorial Day ultimately because we still have our freedom. And I know that we complain sometimes, and we have to be vigilant about attacks on religious freedom, and that's why ADF exists. We have to be vigilant, you know, against overregulating our economy to the point where people don't have opportunity. I understand that, but I was on a walk in my neighborhood recently, and I saw these kids playing around in a park, and I just thought, they are without a care. They are not fearful that they're going to get bombed today. They are probably aspiring to be whatever they want to be when they grow up. And I still believe America is the greatest nation on earth. I think our people have the greatest reason for hope, especially when we put our hope and our faith in Jesus Christ. So ultimately, I did have a very happy Memorial Day and a very thankful one that, you know, so many of the things that we talk about on our show, especially when they happen in other parts of the world, they really do serve as very somber reminders that many people have paid the ultimate price so that we can have the luxuries and the life and the health and wealth and freedom that we have.
Well said, well said. And be thankful. And be thankful. And be thankful. Open your New Testament sometime. Do a little word search sometime on how many times that's said. Be thankful. Thankfulness for God's blessings is the prime virtue of the Christian. Thankfulness.
So in closing, guys, as Linda Rossi said so well in our chat window, hold your kids' hand at the zoo, don't beat your wife, hire hourly part-time only, and eat pizza. That's today's show.
Absolutely.
I'm so hungry
right.
now.
Hey, can she write the headline?
Oh,
the headline
man.
for our show? That's
That
awesome.
said, guys, where can people follow you guys in the midst of this next week until the next show?
You can find me on Twitter at Brian G. Mattson. You can find me on my public Facebook page at Dr. Brian G. Mattson. drbrianmattson.com is my website.
You can follow me on Twitter at Hadley Heath. Taking a little business trip to Washington, D.C. the rest of this week, so you might see me tweeting on Eastern Time.
You going to be there Sunday? When do you come back?
I go tomorrow, and I come back on Friday.
Oh, okay, I'll be there next Sunday.
I'll be in LA tomorrow.
Sorry to miss you.
Nah, that's too bad.
Yeah, I'm going for an event hosted by the Independent Women's Forum, which is where I work, and their website is iwf.org. But you guys know what I'm gonna say. I don't speak for IWF on Dead Reckoning. My opinions are mine, and I will be fully held accountable for them, just on my own, just me.
Well done. And to follow Dead Reckoning on all our social media accounts, please visit www.deadreckoning.tv, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're Remley's experimenting with Snapchat. Chap Snap. Damn.
Whatever it is.
That said, thanks to Remley, our producer, for gathering all of today's topics, for Brian for putting them all together in some sort of organized fashion, and for you guys, especially, for making this show a raging success. But most of all, most importantly, is our fans. Our
Thank you,
fans,
guys.
those of you guys that join us on live stream, those of you who subscribe to our podcast, share our content, please do so. While you're there on iTunes, give us a 5-star review. It would be awesome. That said, we will see you late next week, probably a Thursday or Friday show. We're all traveling, so
It'll be Friday, I think.
there you go.
Yep.
Friday show. Put it on your calendars, guys. It was a pleasure. Thanks for hanging out. Love you guys. It's good times.